this. So hi, I am Aarushee. I am an independent researcher who loves to critique existing practices and brainstorming innovative solutions. Through my work, I try to go beyond the majoritarian understanding of social issues and bring stories from the periphery to the center. As a part of this fellowship, I designed two projects actually, but I'll be talking about one because there are time constraints. This one project that I'll be talking about is understanding India's digital education divide from an intersectional lens. For this, I have created a tableau story under the mentorship of my amazing mentor, Sissy, who's also here right now. And we have kind of created chapters out of this. So there are about 10 chapters. So I'll try to quickly go through each chapter. And all these dashboards, if I could call them, all these slides, these chapters, they have really insightful information that we can explore and look at. For example, this very first chapter, it's an introductory chapter. And once you hover over these icons, you can look at the graphs, which we'll be talking about in detail later in the chapter. I think my screen's stuck. I cannot scroll down right now. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So this is an introductory chapter, which is just introducing the problem. But like I said, once we hover over, we can have a look at the graphs, and these graphs will be talking about them in detail in the chapters to follow. Every chapter will be also showcasing story of this one particular student. I've changed the name, but the story is intact and true to the core. So we'll be talking about Tara's story, who is from West Bengal. And I'll just quickly go over her story. And so basically, she's a 24-year-old who also works alongside pursuing her master's course in one of the top institutes in India. And she works with her family in a tea garden wherein she earns hourly wages. And she particularly chose to pursue a master's degree because she wanted to kind of get out of this vicious cycle of poverty. And she thought that once she is able to, kind of secure a degree for herself, then probably she can look for better employment opportunities. So through the chapters, we'll be also kind of exploring and looking at story of Tara. Moving on to the next chapter, it briefly touches upon the context of the research study and sets the context for her. For example, it's still loading. I'm sorry, it's taking a bit time. Anyways, like I'll go on. Yeah. So because this study was so important, I really wanted to make sure that first, that it is student-led, and second, that the tool that we're going to use to collect data, given that we were collecting primary data for this project, was true to its core and was being approved by the student, and was something wherein the agency of the students were maintained. So first we conducted a pilot, which was with a very small group of students, 50 students from 2 states. Our idea behind selecting this number of students and from these particular states was because it was easier for me to access those academic institutions, given that I was previously associated with them during the time of COVID-19 pandemic. And once we were done with the pilot, we understood that this was a really important and social issue that we really needed to upscale and understand at a larger level. And then we upscaled it 10 times and reached out to 557 students from across 130 cities and 22 states in India. And throughout this story, I felt that it's very important because one of the major reasons why I picked up the story was I had personally faced this disconnect in the academic space during the submission of my own dissertation, my master's dissertation, which happened during this pandemic. And second was because I was reading a lot through newspapers. I was listening a lot about the student story of how, this digital divide was increasing and widening day by day. However, there was this one issue that I could identify, and that was all these newspaper coverage on reports. They used to talk about how students are facing the issue. However, I couldn't understand, I couldn't gauge the nuance or the unique lived realities of students from different parts of the country. So that I really wanted to capture in this research project that we did. So once you click on this button here, you'll be able to see a lot of filters. which are basically a medium for the user to kind of then understand the intersectionality of each data point. So for us, it becomes very important, and also like we then kind of have that agency to understand, okay, what about the women from a particular caste? How did they fare on a particular data point? Or what about a person or an individual coming from a different particular socioeconomic background? So these filters will help you with that. And in the chapters to follow, I'll play around with some of the filters to kind of share some insights. But not just the filters, we can also use these graphs which are here on this chapter as filters. For example, if I click on this particular graph on ownership of laptop, and I see, okay, the participants who said that they did not own a laptop per se, which is again, like the first chapter showed us, one of the prime necessities when it comes to digital education. For them, the average rating of ease of using digital devices, it fell way down. It was like 5.491%. However, for the participants who said that yes, they do own a laptop, which was like considerably low than the one who do not, for them, for them using digital devices, be it smartphones or laptop, it went way up. So these are very important insights which we can then kind of gauge from these chapters across the story. And again, like I said, every chapter tells us Tara's story based on the theme of that chapter. For example, here, like I have already shared before, Tara chose to get into a master's course because she really wanted to kind of get a better employment opportunity for herself and like take her family out of this vicious circle of poverty. Moving on to the next chapter, which I feel like is a very, very important chapter. It helps us understand the needs of students with disabilities and also students who have special needs with respect to language, because in India, we speak lots of language. However, when it comes to these important institutions like the one in which Tara is enrolled, English is supposed to be the medium in which most of the communication takes place. So now, okay. So now what we see here are a set of graphs wherein, like I said, if we choose any of these, we can filter it down to is really insightful content. If we look at this particular graph of percentage of students with disability, so we can see here that close to like about 29.08% students or the participants are the participants who have special needs, and out of them, like 46.941%, they do require language assistance. But here, when we see whether their college provides language assistance or not, we can we can see that close to 53.70% said that college doesn't provide such assistance. And further disaggregated by gender, we can look at the percentage of women participants, percentage of male participants. We do not need to like just stop at this. Unfortunately, because I have time constraints, I cannot play around with all the filters. But once we, filter it and disaggregate it by caste, we can see that women from a particular caste, how they are facing this problem. Women belonging to a particular income background, they are faring on these parameters. Moving on to the next three chapters. So these three chapters, I personally call them the heart and soul of the story, because they explore the 3 A's of education, which are accessibility, affordability, and availability. These dashboards, like I've curated them in a manner wherein, first of all, here you can look at the average rating of accessibility of resources before COVID-19 pandemic. This is on a scale of 1 to 10, and wherein 1 means not accessible, 10 means easily accessible, and the average rating of accessibility of resources during COVID-19 pandemic. This kind of helps us to draw this comparison and to see what was happening before and during pandemic. Now, if we filter it down like this particular graph on the left hand side of the screen, and if we see that, okay, before COVID-19 pandemic, the participants who rated their access to learning resources as 10 was this, and this is disaggregated by gender. And similarly, like the same set of participants, if we look at what was their performance during the COVID-19 pandemic, we can significantly see that there has been decrease in the women participants who are rating their access to learning resources as 10. So not just by gender. Like I said, we can further, if we disaggregate this by caste, we'll see that women is not a homogeneous community. When we talk about intersectionality, we do not have to limit ourselves to talking in terms of gender, caste, religion alone. Like within the group of women, we have to see what is like, what about the women belonging to a particular caste, what about the women belonging to a particular income group. So for me, like, I feel this project will help the end users understand the marginalizations within the marginalization. So that is what I really wanted to achieve with this project. And again, like with respect to Tara's stories, what we'll see is that because she does not have access to digital devices per se, she is facing a lot of challenges. And again, like I said, she is facing a lot of struggles in terms of understanding the basic conversations happening in the lectures. And therefore, like, although college tries to intervene and come up with some solution, but that is not consistent or permanent, or is being able to cater to her needs immediately. And that's why her learning curve is very, very different from the learning curve of most of her peers. Then moving on to the next chapter, we look at affordability of learning resources. Again, like, this is a very interesting chapter wherein we can see, for example, if we play around with this graph right here with respect to requirement for travel, what we'll see if we click on this, I mean 9.52% of participants said that they needed they had to travel every day to access stable internet and electricity connections. And because of that, like, their average rating of the value addition from the online learning was barely 5.49. Like, this was the average rating. However, for the participants who were not, like, who did not had to travel on a daily basis, their average rating was still like better. So these are the findings or something like we can see immediately. But once again, like I said, if you play with filters around, I'll do that in the chapters to follow. We'll be able to see that for ourselves. Again, with respect to Tara, her story in this chapter, it tells us that how difficult it has been for her to afford this education, this master's course. Although she applied for a scholarship, she never heard back. And also the college again tried to intervene, and they sent her a laptop, but the laptop wasn't working. And then although she didn't want to take up any loans, but she had to, and that way her debt has started increasing. So she's still struggling a lot on lots of fronts. Then moving to the last A of the education, that is availability, which again, I feel is very, very important to look at. Let's play around. Let's try to play around with some filters here. If I if I try to disaggregate this data and look at how about what was the average rating of availability of learning resources before and during COVID-19 pandemic, when we disaggregated by gender. So this was the rating: 7 before, 7.0 before, 6.0 during. Now, if I further disaggregate this, the group of women itself by caste, like I was talking about, let's look at women coming from scheduled tribes. So for them, before it was 7.2, during it became 5.1. Then again, further, if we disaggregate it by caste and look at the general caste, let's see if there's a difference or if it's not. Yes, there is there is a significant difference here, as we can see. And if we try to further disaggregate this by income, which we'll do in the another chapter, we'll see that there is again a significant difference. And these are the intersectionalities that I really want the end users to be able to explore for themselves. Moving on to another chapter, which looks at the quality and value addition of that the students have been able to kind of rate for themselves from online education. This again, it's a very important chapter, because I feel it's very important for students as well as the teachers, professors, to be able to understand what has been the learning curve, in what direction it is going, is it adding any value or not. And there is a significant difference that we can see right now, even if we do not play with any filters. Before it was 7.2, during 5.8, the average rating. Again, if we play with filters, we'll see that it varies across intersections. And Tara's story here tells us, she's talking about her learning curve and how it has been very different from her peers. And one of the major problems that she's facing is that she's not able to actually participate in any of the activities which are happening post the college timings, because she's living in a secluded village in West Bengal, where the availability of electricity is not as good as the other urban quote unquote areas. And therefore because electricity is not available after a particular time, that is 9 p.m. in her own village, therefore she has to like she cannot participate in the group activities that group assignments that take place amongst the students. So that is again like somehow impacting her value addition, that she's not able to fully like absorb everything from the lecture. And then we move to the this important chapter, deferment, which is also like the second last chapter. So I'll just quickly conclude. This, honestly, I feel like this is one of the most important chapters for the presentation, because all the chapters preceding this kind of build up this moment or this chapter. Because once the person, the user, is going through the story, if an audience is looking at the story, a person, they would want to know, okay, what would happen if a student with disability, their needs are not met? What would happen if the 3 A's, so-called A's of education, they are not adequately provided? What would happen? So there's this procedure called deferment. There's this option which is provided to students wherein they can, temporarily take a break and come back to the educational space maybe after a year. And honestly, I was not very well aware about this concept before COVID-19 pandemic, because especially in India, not talking about Western context here, in India, this term like got very famous and like people started using it on a daily basis, because like a lot of students were opting for deferment. Here, I would take a moment and I will play around with some filters, because this is very interesting insight that I've come up with. And that is, if we disaggregate this entire data and look at what has been like, what's the percentage of women who considered but did not like ultimately opt for a deferment. So if we just look at that percent, we'll see that it is, just a second, it's taking time to load. Okay, yeah, so we'll see, we are seeing here, it's the percentage 19.93 is the percent of women who considered but did not opt for, like, if I'll just select this, so that's the only graph that you'll see, which will make things easier for us. Yeah, 19.93. If I disaggregate this data by gender again, and now look at the male participants only. Okay, yeah, okay, I can talk about the insights while it's loading. When we look at the male, like the male participants who considered but did not opt for a deferment, it's lower. Now, when we move to another filter, we look at what has been the percentage of women participants who actually opted for a deferment. It's lower than the male participants, which is actually bringing a very interesting insight for us to look at. And that is, the choice of taking a deferment is gendered in itself. And this is not something that I'm like saying it based on this small research study of 557 students, but this is something which has been widely spoken about, and also something which I was able to gauge from the stories of the students that I spoke to in detail. For example, even with Tara and other case studies like I have done and focus group discussions. So this also kind of tells us whether women participants or gender diverse communities, do they have the option of opting for a deferment? Because a lot of them said that for them, opting for a deferment is equivalent to dropping out, and the chances for them to return back to the academic space are very, very less, and hence they prefer not to opt for a deferment. But in Tara's story, what we'll see is that she is forced to opt for a deferment by her college, by her academic institution, although like she didn't want to. And therefore, right now, she's like in a different mental space altogether. We'll be talking about her story in a bit. Moving on to the last data chapter of this story. This chapter basically looks at the reasons which are contributing to the inefficiencies during COVID-19 pandemic. So we asked the participants to rate their top 3 reasons which they felt were actually leading to the inefficiencies. Again, there's a very, very interesting insight that has come out of this. And that is, when we disaggregate this data by family income and just look at the participants who have family income more than 9 lakhs per annum, for them, the top 3 reasons are different. Like mental health issues, the topmost reason. Second most is lack of access to internet connectivity, and then lack of availability of space to study. However, if we disaggregate it again, like by income, and look at just the households or the participants with income less than 1 lakh per annum, what we'll see here, like this is the one reason which is coming out to be the most important reason, is lack of access to laptop and smartphones across. So again, like this is very important, but we cannot stop here. If we disaggregate this information itself by gender, what we'll see, and we look at women participants, we'll see that another reason which is coming out to be very important, which is juggling household work and study. So like I said, we really need to kind of play around with this data and go deep dive into the intersectionality to understand it further. And for Tara, like we have seen, there were several reasons contributing towards her inefficiency. And right now, her story is that she's living in a different city. She has moved in with a friend, and she's frantically looking for a job because she really needs to pay off her debts. And unfortunately, the story did not end on a good note, as much as we wanted it to. Nevertheless, like this is the reality of majority of students, especially students coming from the marginalized sections in India. And because like I've said multiple times, this is a student-led research. These are the concluding thoughts. I really wanted to go a step ahead and ask, like, collate the demands of the students in terms of what are some of the interventions that can actually help coming from the student itself. And they propose these 3 interventions. First is holistic infrastructural support from the academic institution and the government at large, reimagining assessment procedures, innovative teaching pedagogy, so that students like Tara, they do not have to suffer so much, and sustained mental health support, which is very, very important. We really need to work on this front so that students like Tara and Taras of the country and so many other students do not, give up on their dream to get themselves and their families out of this vicious circle just on the grounds of lack of socioeconomic cultural capital. And with this, I'd like to stop sharing my screen. Before that, I would like to thank each and every 557 student plus 50 student who have been so gracious with their time in participating with this research. And also a big thanks to my mentor Sissy, who's here right now. And I can vouch for this, that hadn't it been for her constant guidance, support, I wouldn't have been able to execute this vision, given that I'm not a journalist per se. So I'm an independent researcher, and I'm on that front, I'm always very excited to work on new projects. But her support has been phenomenal, and working with her, working in this space, I have grown as a feminist, evolved my practice on a daily basis, and have seen for myself how mentorship can actually build more feminist spaces and decentralize and democratize knowledge and redistribute it. So thank you so much. And thank you to Equal Measures 2030 and Tableau Foundation for investing in me and identifying my capabilities and trusting me with that. So thank you so much. I hope I was able to do justice. Yeah, I'll stop now.
Very good, Aarushee. No, thank you. Thank you. That was really a tour de force.